This is the Town of Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals. It is Wednesday night, April 24th, 2024. A continued hearing on Farm Road Homes under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40B. I'm Rick Novak, the chair, joined here by Jonathan Fitch, Todd Labby, and Zach McBride, who disappeared off my screen, but I know he's here somewhere. And as always, controlled by the lovely and talented Jeannie Guthrie. All right, so are there other boards here that wish to open tonight?
Board of Health.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
All right. Noting that it's 7:03 p.m. on April 24th, 2024, I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order, which is basically a joint meeting with the ZBA. Daryl Beardsley present.
Diana Hook present.
Rebecca Honeywell present.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And does the select board wish to open or do anything? Maybe
I think I'm the only select board member here right now, so we do not have a quorum.
All right, great. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, one of the things I'd like to do tonight that we haven't always done is I'd like to try to Doug, let me get through my inventory, but as soon if I miss you after that, please raise your hand again. I'd like to inventory people who know they're going to speak tonight. And this does not cut off your right to say, wait a second, I have a question about some X, Y, or Z. But sometimes people come in and say, yeah, I'm here with my engineer, Mr. Smith, and we want to talk about traffic or whatever. And I've got extensive commentary on something that Creative Land and Water Engineering put in. I'm just trying to get out on the table, how many of those do we have here, if any? Brian Moore, you got your hand up. Is that because you want to speak?
Yeah, I would like to make a short statement at some point. It doesn't have to be at the beginning or end. It can be whenever.
All right. I bet I won't miss you. All right.
Thank you.
Doug Kingsley's got to want to be heard, okay? That's
Yep.
two. Anybody else? Okay, great. So maybe we don't have a long list of those. All right. Doug Kingsley, you had your hand up first. Go ahead, sir.
Just had a procedural question. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. So I can't imagine why, and maybe someone could explain to me why this meeting is online and not in person in 2024. The pandemic is long over. Online meetings are fundamentally anti-democratic and discriminatory. I think a lot of people, particularly the vulnerable, the poor, the elderly, don't have computers or don't know how to use them. I would use my mother-in-law as an example, 20-year resident of Sherborn, never owned a computer, could not possibly join this meeting or speak up in this meeting. I'd like to move that future meetings are all in person. Why are we still doing this? Just because the state allows it doesn't mean it's right.
Well, Mr. Kingsley, first of all, you're not empowered to make any motions because you're not a member of the board.
Got it.
Well, you can suggest that we so move, but let me give you the counterpoint, which is there are an awful lot of people who cannot get to in-person meetings who can attend. And that is why the legislature has allowed this and why a number of boards, including this one, have continued to adopt it. So if the fellow board members move to go to all in-person meetings, that's fine. It will not get my vote.
Why not a hybrid meeting then?
Where some people can be in, because that is an administrative inconvenience to those of us for whom it's a lot easier to run it from home.
So this will never change?
Doug, your complaint is not with this board or this matter. Your complaint is with a process that has been approved by the legislature.
No, I'm sorry. I'm asking the board the question. Just because the legislature has allowed it, you can decide to have meetings in person or online. I'm just wondering why you're having them online.
Well, because they are, in my view, and the other board members speak for themselves, faster, more efficient, and far more democratic. I see it completely differently than you do. And you're allowed to have your view. Mr. Fitch, are you in favor of in-person meetings?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I,
Mr.
I,
Labby,
I think as a, alternative, these, video conference meetings are much more efficient. I do think we get a better turnout. I think there's a better opportunity for people to comment. And, it's much less burdensome administratively. So
right.
I agree with you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Labby, what's your view? In person or Zoom or remote or hybrid?
For me, Zoom is far more convenient and far more time efficient. And it reduces the amount of time that we would have to spend commuting back and forth to a localized location, even if it is just 10 minutes down the road. As a parent of 2 young children, I like to be able to say goodnight to the kids or help with dinner. And if we had to travel somewhere and meet in person, that would make that an awfully lot harder. And it would increase the amount of time that I'm taking away from my professional life and my family life to volunteer for this effort. It would be increased further than what it already is. So I'm not in favor of in-person meetings.
Okay. Mr. McBride.
Yeah, I echo Todd's sentiments. I have 2 young children as well, and I was just giving one of them their second dinner while my wife was dealing with another one. So unfortunately, I think the video conference for those of us who are volunteering and have competing I would say a lot of competing obligations, it makes it more possible to commit the amount of time necessary to to give the attention needed.
Okay. Board members, I will make a motion that we continue to use the remote recorded video conferences for the time being, as they are continue to be allowed by the Massachusetts legislature. That is my motion.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion, board members? Okay, hearing none, we have to vote by roll call. An aye vote means we continue to work, we continue with our remote process as we have before. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Kingley, we did go the other way. Your view is a legitimate one, and we appreciate it. Did you have other administrative or substantive comments?
Oh, I have a number of questions and comments about the subject matter tonight, but I will wait.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. If you obviously know how to raise your electronic hand, but if I miss you, please speak up.
Thank you.
Did somebody else have a hand up? Leslie Doyle, were you waiting to speak?
It was just regarding that issue, so I guess that's moot. Other than I want to say, as an immune-compromised person, I'm very grateful that we have these meetings like this. I couldn't come in person. COVID is not a thing in the past for me, unfortunately, and I'm really grateful to be included. Thank you.
Got it. Okay. All right. Moving along on the agenda. Bob, one thing I thought I'd try to do, because it's been essentially a month since we met on this one, was I thought I'd try to walk through a status recap, and maybe you and your team can correct me if I get it wrong. But that's sort of my plan, if that's acceptable to you. I see his head nodding. Okay. Okay. So we were last here on March the 20th. There was some discussion of an potential alternate plan. It's my understanding the alternate plan is off the table. We're back to essentially the original plan as reflected in the updated plans that were just filed on the 19th, and they're dated the 17th. Did I do okay on that part?
I would say that we are proceeding with the plan as originally proposed, yes.
Okay, fine.
Rick, just to say the obvious, I raised it to see if there was more support within the community, and
Right.
I didn't really feel the love of the alternate plan. So
no, okay. I meant no disrespect to the alternate plan. I was just trying to clarify its status. Okay. We haven't talked about it in a long time, but we have the title restriction as an open issue. I think it's been well documented and vetted in front of the board, but it's still there. It's unresolved. And we don't have to necessarily resolve it in the public hearing phase. We can resolve it in our deliberations phase. Same with public-private water supply. The current plans continue the private water supply proposal, which has been on the table for quite a while from the applicant. I think they were very clear with us that if they do have to do a public water supply, that will mean some pretty serious design changes. And again, there's been a lot of back and forth, but I don't think there's any new discussion there. I think it's just an open issue that the board has to resolve which way they're going to go and how they're going to document which way they go.
I guess the one question, Rick, I would have on that for the board would be, do you believe that I've adequately shown you that it would be impossible to do 32 cottages and have a public water supply?
No, speaking for myself, you have not shown me that it's impossible.
Okay.
You've shown me that it would be highly inconvenient and that you don't want to do it.
I'm telling you it's physically impossible. So
okay, well, all right. Board members, you can speak for yourselves on your degree of persuasion that a public water supply is impossible versus undesirable. And you also don't have to say anything.
Well,
I would just ask Mr. Murchison to explain, bullet points. What makes it impossible versus inconvenient. If you could just run through that.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that, Zach. The problem is that the public water supply takes about approximately, and there's some nuance to all of this, but approximately a circle with a diameter of 300 feet that has to be owned by the applicant, okay? In other words, I need to encircle a no-touch zone around all of the wells. And in this case, you're talking about somewhere between 3 and 5 wells to provide the water for this type of community. And so if you're required to put a circle with about a 300-foot diameter, give or take, around those wells, and you have to own the land, if you literally, and I literally cut out a piece of paper to scale and laid it around on the plan. And you can't build wells where you've got a grade of 25%, right? So you say, well, you've got all this land, Bob. Yes, we do have a lot of land, but there's a lot of what I'll call grade challenged land. And I chose to propose to the community and to this board single family cottages because I thought that would be the right fit on this property, 32 single family for sale cottages. You have to lay those out. They need to be built in places where they can be built and it can kind of be designed into a community. When you do that, and when you consider the grade on the land, the only place to put that public water supply is where I showed it to you when I showed you the possibility of doing an apartment building. And if you do that, you would cut the number of possible for sale homes probably by about 2/3, which
and
makes
just roughly with I guess Farm Road is south, so I guess it's a good reference.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zach. Maybe you weren't at the meeting when I showed this.
Maybe not.
Okay, that's probably
sorry. You could just articulate.
Yeah.
Generally where.
I understand now. So the wells, as I showed them, I guess it was last time we met. I can't recall, would be just to the west. If you're standing on Farm Road, to the left or to the west of the pond and the wetlands, and far enough away that they wouldn't be in the area that is flooded. Sometimes.
So between the pond and the entrance, roughly, and that newer home that's also on Farm Road.
Well, I would say much closer to the pond. But what that does is because the circle's so large, it drives the driveway very far west. And so you lose the ability to put, I think right now we've probably got 12 homes in the area where the driveway would go up and just obliterate our ability to put homes there. And I believe that's the only place that public water supply could go. And as I showed you, and again, I'd be happy to go back over that should anyone desire it, but the apartment building allows us to resolve a lot of the issues, including the public water supply issue. But I want it to be clear to the board that it's not physically possible to do a public water supply and still have an economic single-family cottage for sale product.
Now we've gotten to the heart of what's impossible versus what's inconvenient, because you did choose this site and you did choose the size. So then saying it's the board's problem that you can't fit what might be the safe water supply there is not. That's why I say it's not so much impossible.
Yeah, I mean, we all have private wells. Abbey Road has private wells. They're safe water supplies, Rick. I have to disagree with you that private wells are unsafe water supplies. We all drink them every day.
I did not say private wells are unsafe. I drink from one too.
Okay, good.
But if you're saying that the only possible water supply that can be used for this many people in this dense a facility is a private one, I think there are a lot of people who would disagree with you.
Okay, I mean, we can leave it at that.
I think we do. I get that.
So just to clarify my understanding, because I did miss a meeting, I did watch the video, but maybe it's not the same as, live. So,
yeah, of course.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the land, the dimensions of the land would permit a public water supply, but it would in fact make the project uneconomical based on the impact of the original design.
Well, let's say let me give you an example of it, right, Zach? It's pretty clear. If you put a public water supply up on, I call it the mesa, kind of the flat land in the back of this property, if you put your wells on that mesa, and you could do that, you're going to be able to build fewer than half of the cottages that we've proposed. And I'll let my counsel speak to what's economic and not economic, but I think cutting the number of homes in half would be a pretty large economic hit. So Zach, yes, we can.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if you're shrinking your resale units by 50%, it significantly changes the numbers of the project.
Exactly.
But potentially in a significantly unfavorable way. So no, I agree with you. I'm just trying to understand, is it the land that's constraining you or the economics based on the original plan? I just want to be clear on.
Well, it's the combination, of course, of both. Yeah. In other words, that's, and Rick, you say I chose the site. Yes, I chose the site. It was the land that was available in town to build affordable housing on. So that's why we're here.
Right. No, that's all legit, and I get it. This is the interaction of the physical site, the size of the site, the angles of the site, where you can drill, and all sorts of things.
And I would further tell you, Rick, that Abbey Road, which I think is a beautiful community that has been incredibly successful, if it was required to be a public water supply, and I know the geometry of all of this, right? I live it every day. The geometry is Abbey Road could never be built under current public water supply regulations. Woodhaven could never be built. Leland Farms could never be built under current public water supply regulations. I'm not saying they're wrong, but they're very difficult to do modest size communities, right? If you're going to build a 100-unit apartment building, you can do a public water supply, but if you're going to do and I happen to think that more modest multifamily communities make sense in our town, not 187, just to pick a number. I don't think 187 unit projects make a lot of sense in a town of our scale. But the town's going forward with one, obvious, or attempting to go forward with one. But public water supplies are very difficult for smaller communities. They really can't be done today. I mean, Woodhaven and Leland Farms were built 25 years ago. Abbey Road could not have been built if it was forced to be a public water supply.
Bob, I hear all of your advocacy. It's legitimate advocacy.
Thank you.
But that issue of public water supply versus private water supply is still open, and that's for the board to decide. Within the handcuffs of the regulation.
My counsel has previously stated that it's not within your purview, but you will make up.
Well, Mr. Haverty is not always correct, even though I like and respect him.
Fair enough.
That's my wife.
All right. Daryl Beardsley, you had your hand up. Oh, and I'm sorry, Daryl, before we go to you, a couple of things came up in the chat. we always mention that, but I'll mention it again because there's some new people here. The chat isn't part of our record. So if you've got something important to say, please make sure you get it into our recorded record. Yes, Daryl.
I'll just share a conversation that I had with, or several conversations I had with Mass DEP on this topic. So the radius that was mentioned of about 300 feet would be really oriented towards a large single well, but it is possible, according to Mass DEP, to use multiple interconnected wells that all feed their water to one central distribution point. And each of those wells, the protective radius around them would be determined by what kind of flow they're generating. So that allows, for example, the private wells that are now being proposed might actually be able to be interconnected and turn into a public water supply, according to Mass DEP. Also, the protective radius around the well has to be protected for, and it's easiest for someone if they own all the land that circle around the well is on. But if an arrangement can be made that guarantees all the protections that would be provided by the owner of the well on their own land, if the neighboring land, whoever that's under the control of, was willing to agree to the requirements, then that would be satisfactory to DP.
Right. Although, and I'll make this argument for Bob, as he pointed out, the neighbor who would have to agree is, I think, the Town Conservation Commission, and his forecast is that approval is not likely. Is that fair?
If you'll allow me, Rick, to just respond. What Daryl said about how this works is just really incorrect. You're right that we could put together 6 or 7 wells. That part is correct. The problem is that the diameter or the radius of the circle that goes around each of those wells does get a little bit smaller, but actually, unless you put all of the wells fairly close together, the way I showed it a month ago to you, right? Unless you do that, from a geometry perspective, you take away far more land in Daryl's suggestion. It's simply the geometry does not work. We don't have time to really get into it, but it does not work.
Okay, I appreciate that's your position, and you appreciate that there are other positions I trust. Okay, let's go to one that I hope is a lot easier. Solar panels, non-issue because they're off the plan, right?
Yeah, the town's decided that they don't like solar and have removed it from the plan.
Okay. Leaving out the editorial politics, they're off the plan.
Sorry.
Okay. Stormwater, wetlands, and septic. We still have a lot of wood to chop, but I thought maybe we would probably hit those in the course of working through the peer reviewer comments. And board members, what I was hoping to do next was sort of walk through the peer reviewer and Deshaun Wang latest interaction, because I think, and Bob, tell me if I have this wrong, or Deshaun, tell me if I have this wrong, but is it your view that your letter, your annotated letter back and forth, which was very helpful, by the way, that you sent in on, I think it was the 17th, April 17th.
Friday, I think it was, yes.
Yeah, Friday. Well, whatever, it's dated the 17th. We probably got it on the 19th, but whatever. It's dated, updated April 17th. That you two see that as a sort of final resolution or a series of notes on resolutions on what isn't open.
Well, I guess the way I would say it, Rick, is that, I don't want to speak for Tetra Tech, clearly.
They're going to speak.
Exactly. But it's our belief that, for the most part, I'm not saying Tetra Tech won't continue to have an issue here and an issue there. But we addressed all of the major issues And I anticipate, particularly on the septic, that we're very much on the same page at this point on septic. On the stormwater, Steve was ill, and unfortunately, DeShang and Steve were not able to speak. Steve and Peter were able to speak at length on the septic, which is why I can say more definitively that I think we're in good shape on the septic with Tetra Tech. On the stormwater, because they haven't spoken, I hesitate a little bit, but we believe that we have provided, strong answers to Steve's remaining questions. I will say just really quickly that this last exercise was really quite interesting to me as a non-engineer and a non-science person. And that is because Tetra Tech, in several ways, primarily in the septic engineering, came back and said, well, DeShang, we'd like to see you, do your analysis using a different methodology, different science, different formulas and different approaches, if you will. And we were a little taken back by that, obviously, because DeShang's been doing this a long time, but different people have different ways of approaching these things. However, we did go and do that work as Tetra Tech asked us, and we spent the time and we did the work and we did the analysis in different ways than we had originally done it. And we pretty much got answers that are very similar. And I'll let DeShang and Peter and Steve talk to the details of that. But we got acceptable results using Tetra Tech's methodologies instead of DeShang's. And I think in the work I do a lot of triangulating. When you can triangulate to the same answer from different places and different methodologies, that usually means you're in a good place. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Steve or Peter from Tetra Tech, I don't see you on the screen, but I bet you're out there.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chairman. This is Steve Boyd.
Okay. Hey, Steve, are you feeling better? I'm sorry, you had what, pneumonia?
I'm 38 years old and got pneumonia. I don't know how that happens, but
It happens to everybody.
It knocked me down for about 2 weeks, so I apologize if I'm a little behind currently, but yes, we did have a cursory review of what was submitted.
Okay.
And we can go through that.
Yeah, so I was going to, well, if you want to walk us through the April 17 letter from Creative Land and Water and where you agree and you disagree, great. If not, I went through it and I had some questions myself, but it's your show. You're our peer reviewer.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this is a typical response letter. We generally get responses like this from most of our applicants. For the most part, I think most of the items have been addressed. There were a few minor site related issues with the no parking and no parking signage and minor things like that we can hash out with the applicant. But stormwater wise, I think they're
Steve, just by way of process, do you intend to respond to this letter?
Yeah, typically we like to get every comment responded to.
No, I'm good. I just want
how.
to make sure that there's going to be something better than my crappy handwritten notes to
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll have a formal response to this, and generally we like to go all the way to completion of each comment.
Yeah, good. Okay, keep going. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no worries. Moving to stormwater, for the most part, most of the comments we thought had been addressed. We do need some more backup for a few of the items. Specifically and Peter can talk about kind of the groundwater mounding in more depth, but the basins, the bottom, most of the basins were moved up to get out of that 2-foot zone from high groundwater. I do disagree on one of the basins, which we can figure out technically with DeShang on offline. Basin V2, based on test pit data.
And assuming that there's room on the site to fix this problem, it sounds like, easily.
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
Yeah, okay.
With a minor redesign, or we can figure that out. It's just the
Right.
height of groundwater, which test pit was used to determine that groundwater.
Okay.
For recharge, they went and used the Rawls rate, which is an acceptable method per Mass DEP, which is essentially just it's rates associated with the soil type. That is an acceptable method, so they went and did that. And really, stormwater wise, there was nothing else major other than the mounding analysis, which Peter will get into that with the with kind of intermingling that with the septic and that and the study of groundwater with that. So Peter, if you want, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just trying to link up what you're telling me with my notes. So you're saying if this one basin gets fixed, you will find, and don't let me put words in your mouth if you don't agree with me, please. It's one of the reasons we value you.
Yep.
Yeah, that their responses on items 20 through 28 will be excuse me, 20 through
47.
20 through 47 will be we'll get a resolved rating from you.
Correct. And most of those had been resolved in the prior
Yeah.
correspondence. Again, we just had a few issues to resolve, but from what I saw in this submission, we do need some more of the backup information. I didn't see any of the model. The model hadn't been resubmitted, but that's something that we can get from Sheng and the team. But I do believe at this time that the stormwater substantially meets the standards.
Okay. All right, and you know what? What I think I'd ask people to do is if you have questions on stormwater and stuff, let's maybe wait till we work through the entire peer review letter, and then we can loop back on specific questions, just so we don't get bogged down. Okay, I'm because you can tell what I'm trying to do, Steve and Bob. I'm just trying to narrow, where's there a problem and where isn't there a problem.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's see what comes after 47, 48. All right, so now we're into erosion and sedimentation control.
Yeah, and that's all going to be there's going to be a SWIP for the project, so that's a condition. It's general. That's standard for most projects. And then we get into the water supply. We kind of spoke about that already. That's going to be mostly conditional based on Mass DEP approval or whatever this board requires.
Right.
Then septic starts at 57, and Peter can get into what he's reviewed as part of the septic design.
Awesome. All right, Peter, you're up.
Okay, so I've looked at it. I haven't pulled it apart yet, but it looks like all the questions were answered. What I would like to do is to try and resolve all this is actually get together with Sheng and in person and go through this and make sure we're both on the same page, and rather than going back and forth for 2 or 3 more times to try and get this everything resolved at once.
Okay, and while I guess a bunch of us, or at least I, had hoped that meeting would happen already for a variety of reasons, it just hasn't. But is that a 1-week process? Is that a 50-week process?
No,
somewhere between those, probably.
What I'd like to do is get together the first part of next week. So we got the comments on Friday. I've looked at it, and like I said, most everything looks like it's been addressed. I've got a couple of questions that I think that would be better to go over in person rather than to go back and forth 2 more times.
Got it.
So what I would like to do, because I would like to finish this, is to get together at the very beginning of next week with the Sheng and just kind of go through it and make sure we're on the same page, or get to being on the same page.
Right, okay.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, part of that was
Okay.
my fault. I had gotten, I was in the process of scheduling that meeting, and I had gotten sick like right after that, so it kind of got lost in the shuffle there. So I was hoping to have it all completed by this meeting, but you know, things worked out differently.
Certainly, at least in my view, your bona fides on diligence and responsiveness are very well established. You know, sometimes things happen. Okay. So Peter, if I hear you correctly, the answer on septic is I got to get together with Deshaun and make sure we're on the same page or not. I think we probably are going to be, and that's not a very long process. That's like a week or so. Did I hear you correctly?
There's a few things that need to get resolved, but we're getting there.
All right. Is there anything that you would characterize, and this, I'm not an engineer, so I'm probably not using the right term, a likely major substantive disagreement that you can just see coming?
No, there's some disagreements, but I don't.
Okay. Right. So we'll shut up, sit down, and let the process work.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know if this is back to Steve, but who's got the lead on wetlands starting at 61?
That is I. Yeah, in our prior review, it looked like they had done some compensatory storage for the issues with the flooding around the wetland area. There was some, I thought there was some missing contours, but I believe that had been rectified. Just getting back into this.
And you may not have had a chance to review it, but there's been a fair amount of back and forth between the co-chair of our CONSCOM and the applicant on various local requirements and whether they're allowable or not. I think those views speak for themselves, but
yeah,
if you guys can weigh in on what you think is good, safe, fair practice in your peer reviewer, wearing your peer reviewer hat, that would be great.
Okay, we'll do. Yeah, I haven't had too much time to dig into this, but we will certainly do that in this next review round.
Yeah, and if you don't have those easily, Jeannie Guthrie can send them to you. They all came by email. So
yeah, I received those today.
Okay, thank you. I mean, ultimately, it's our decision, but you are helpful to us in weighing in as a professional, neutral voice. Okay. So that is 60 to 66. And how am I scoring that? How am I writing that down? That you need to take a look at the Michael Lesser, Bob Murchison discussions and let us know where you
That's
think
correct.
that should sell out. Okay. Board members, unless you disagree, I think that's a good next step on that one. I see nodding heads. Good. Okay. Okay. So what's 67?
Those were just additional comments we had. They were very minor in
Oh, yeah.
nature, more just construction related items that'll help.
Right. Yeah. There was nothing major in those. Okay. Okay, so I can sort of see a path ahead on the peer review. From iPhone to everyone, this is what the chair is looking at. I don't know what that is. Let's see. Huh. I don't know what that means.
It's what's posted, Rick, it's what's posted on the website. It's Shag's response.
His letter of the
Yes.
of the
And
seven,
that
yes.
those are the numbered items. They're on that.
Yes. I'm sorry if people were confused. Yeah, I was going with the numbering in maybe camera to focus on it. There it is. It's a letter like this. It's about 80 pages. First 29 pages is narrative, and a lot of the narrative is back and forth. Track said this, Creative Land said that, so that you can sort of see. It's a lot to read, but it does contain sort of the whole record and all the back and forth. So it's it is difficult to read, but it's a good record of sort of where people are going on these things. I recommend to any interested party that they read it. Okay. Do we have other people who have other new issues they want to raise? Comments on what's been submitted by the applicant? They submitted new plans. They submitted Deshaun Wang's report. Bob, what else have you submitted since last time that's new? I thought it was the plans in his report.
So yeah, so I would just say one thing, Rick. The board and I just received a 10 or 12 page presentation from the Board of Health about 5 minutes before the meeting. Obviously, I have not had a chance, and Deshang has not had a chance to review that, and we won't be commenting on it tonight, unfortunately. But we did receive it. Beyond that, there were a number of responses that I have made primarily by a series of, again, numbered emails or emails that referred to numbers of concerns coming out of the Board of Health and sent to you. And I addressed all of those at length. I'm happy to go over those with you or not at your pleasure. But they were, questions about what reference well might be used. And, I answered at length with a lot of research associated with all of these concerns. I'm sure you saw them, Rick, but
yeah. And you're reminding me that I should have mentioned that. It was pretty clear to me from reading that. And again, Daryl or Board of Health members, tell me if I got this wrong. It looks like the issue of what reference well gets used and what soils get used, and but there and whether or not the that star 9,000 or whatever it is,
star 13.5, the series of 4.5s, which
right. It appeared to me in reading the back and forth on that those issues had settled out.
So what I would say, I'll address the star 13.5 first, and that is, this is a situation where clearly DEP intended to approve this series.
Wait a second, I'm not looking for advocacy. I'm just looking to see if the issue is solved or not at this point. And if Daryl says it's solved and we've agreed on it, then I don't want to hear it.
No, I don't believe Daryl has agreed, so I can leave.
Okay, well, so let's get that puzzle part on the table first.
Sure. Yeah.
Daryl, speaking for the Board of Health, do you agree that star 13.5 has been approved?
It has not received provisional use approval yet from Mass DEP. Had multiple communications with them, and actually it was just a couple days prior to our last communication that they had received the application from the vendor of those systems.
Okay.
To get so we need to wait for the approval to see what the conditions are if it gets approved.
Okay. So Bob, since she does not agree that it's settled, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's settled?
All I would say, Rick, is that I don't think this is a deal level issue. This product could be swapped out for another product if necessary. However, what I will tell you is this is a situation where the product has been approved. It's been approved to use in sequence. They have not technically used the number 13.5. They called them engineered systems when they approved them. I think they've realized that they really should have used the language 13.5.
Right.
And
right.
I think this is and the other thing that's going on is the person who is responsible for all of this at DEP is out on long-term medical leave. So there's a little bit of a, kind of back and forth. I do not see this as a significant issue in the long run. Daryl, I think, is correct that technically the approval is not there. I think everybody thought it was because of the language of engineered systems, which is what this is. It approved engineered systems, but it didn't, go as far as to say 13.5, which is 3 4.5s in sequence. So
Right,
I
got
don't
it.
think it's an issue, but we can leave it on.
Even I can do that math.
Exactly. Yep. Do you want to discuss the soil type? That's an important issue.
Well, let me ask Daryl. I thought I read that the soil type issue was resolved, but again, maybe I read it wrong.
So there is some discrepancy in between the Form 11, which is a state form for recording the results from observation pits, subsurface investigations. And so when that was first issued back in early 2022, Mark had reviewed it, and the data on those state forms 11 matched what he had in his book. But what has been subsequently used is not 100% match. And also, then we had this issue come up for the Greenwood homes, which was when you're looking at soils that vary a bit, so sandy loam or loamy sand. The guidance from Mass DEP is to take the more conservative soil. By conservative, that means assume greater impact or lesser impact to groundwater quality by using that soil type. And that was done for Greenwood, but it's not being done here. So that's a simplification. And Mark, if you want to provide, if it'd be okay if Mark provides any more detail, if he has any. I don't know if it's necessary to go into that at the moment, but that's just what we're wrestling with. This is a very large system.
Okay. Well,
density of effluent could have a greater impact on groundwater, so we'd like to see this be as precautionary as we treat individual single-family home systems.
Okay. How
we're
about this?
Consistent in that treatment throughout town.
Okay. How about this for a proposed way to try to cut through the thicket here? Obviously, everybody's position is well documented and written down and submitted to us by emails. We thank you for that as always, because then it can be put up on the website and anybody can sort of drill down into it as far as they want. Unintended, I guess. Steve Bully, is this something that you can ask Peter to look at as part of his looking at the septic as to who has the better end of the stick on which soils characterization and whether it matters, and if it does matter, how much?
Yeah, certainly. I thought this had been rectified with the soil testing.
It has.
It was lab tested, and I think we're on that side of things where we have lab tested data that shows a certain soil type. So I don't know where else we could go with this.
If that's your position, just say so clearly. Say we read the most recent things from the Board of Health, but we still think the lab tests are the lab tests. If that's the right engineering way to say it.
Yeah, I mean a lab tested material, we go with that 100%.
Okay.
May I address this, Rick?
Well, hold on. I think Daryl was next, and then you. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, and maybe Deshong, but Deshong, I bet we'll defer to you. Go ahead, Daryl.
Okay. Part of the issue with that soil testing was authorized by the peer or discussed with Deshang regarding the hydraulic conductivity. The layer from which those soils were taken is different than the layers that are going to be receiving the septic effluent. And Mark can certainly describe that in greater technical detail. And there is no reason that we would exchange two limited samples for multiple pit observations of what the soil looks like. And it changes, the soil types change with depth. And if you're grabbing it from a higher layer, but where the bottom of the SAS is going to be and the soils that that's going to be encountering, that is the more important number to use, and that is not the same number as the soils that were evaluated by a laboratory.
Okay, so is there a way that you or Mark can articulate that in a writing? It can be a memo, it can be an email, it can be anything, but just so that Peter Dillon can take a look at it in a non-verbal way and say, okay, I agree with this or I don't agree with it as an engineer. I mean, we are not Tetra Tech slaves, and we the board are allowed to disagree with them, but we do weigh their views on these.
Okay. I'll also point out again that this is what we do for every septic system in town.
Right. Okay. That's a good fair point.
Yeah, that's the issue, Rick.
Yes.
So the soils, I was there the day they were tested several years ago. DeShang looked at them and said, this is loamy sand. He put it in the soil report. Mark never objected to the soil report and said it was wrong any time until very recently. Okay. When this disagreement came up, the smart people, the engineers, Mark and Peter sat in a room, and Mark Oram was there as well, or excuse me, DeShang, Mark, and Peter sat down, and they said, how are we going to resolve this? It was agreed among the three of them that they would do the testing. We spent several $1,000s to do this. We went back out. We dug the soils from the proper layer. What Daryl is saying is incorrect. We dug them from the proper layer. Okay, that's documented. They went through a lab. They came back. The lab said actually that they were medium sand and loamy sand. Okay, so the lab test was actually better than what we had been saying, which was loamy sand. It came back medium sand in one, loamy sand in another.
Okay, and I appreciate
follow the science.
I appreciate all your advocacy and that you think you have exclusive governance of the science. What I'm saying is, I want the Board of Health to write down their position and turn it over to the peer reviewer so he can weigh in. And if you're asking that not to happen, I hear you that you disagree, but there's no reason.
No, Rick, I've been asking for them to put things in writing for months. I respect you asking them to put it in writing. That is helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Deshaun, I think you were next, and then Mark, I think your hand came up. Deshaun.
Yes, so we did a 2 soil testing on the site for picking up the location, which is one is the upgrading side of our leaching field, one is downgrading side, and the depth is to 6 feet. So which is in the, according to the local as well as DEP 4 feet of permeable soils for Title V soil texture. And so therefore I disagree with what Daryl just said. So we are not in a different layer. We had questions about the color of the soils, and I showed the picture. We were taking the soil sample out to the sunlight. It looks like much more orange, because at the same time, was like in the bucket is the color is much grayer. So I can say, yeah, so under Title V, so you can have soil from topsoils, sandy loam, and to the B layers, and then you can to the C layers. Eventually, to the depth, it will hit bedrock. So doesn't mean you have to use in bedrock as your soil classification. So therefore, you taking the soil sample from the depths, which we pretty much did our perk test, and which is going to be received and applied effluent. And the secondary is about the Greenwood comparison. So I agreed at the Greenwood, because that's just a typical conventional system. I agree that is to make it a little bigger is better. But if you compare that with the farm road is pressure dosing. Secondly, the nitrogen level is treated much better than the Greenwood. So I just don't see that things and adding any conservative. Thirdly, so the soil texture has some correlation with the percolation test rate. So we have a 3 2 4s and only 1 5. So it's a 3 to 5, so within 2 minutes rate for all the perk rate, which is like in line with loamy sand condition. And the lab, I know we went to the site, no matter just me, you can have many soil evaluators and taking the same soil sample. When you get in the soils in the loamy sand to sandy loam kind of discussion, we have a certain kind of methodology to do it. When you do it, the soil is like moisture, it's not definitely saturated wet. So I followed all the trainings and I used the method, and the lab testing basically confirmed what I thinking in the field. But previously we talked about it with Mark and say, well, maybe loamy sand to sandy loam. At that time, I just said, well, to avoid any dispute, I just said, let's call loamy sand to sandy loam. But this one, I guess I double checked my notes. I actually did put only loamy sand in my field notes. And it could be Mark, I respect his opinion. There's no professional opinions. I don't, anybody, I mean, I can disagree with my wife. I have to respect that. I don't want to judge it whether wrong or right, but eventually you have to follow a protocol, which is you have to go to the lab, follow the USGS soil triangle, and we plot it out, and that's what it is. And it's difficult, you can say, if you have too many silt or you have less silt, because that's very subjective and judgmental, even to this very wide range of things. So that's why I don't want to say absolutely. That's why we agreed at the meeting. Bob mentioned Mark, Peter, and I did, and we did pretty agreed with the two. If we at that time wanted 3, I would do 3. I don't mind to do 3. We did a 4 or 5 perk test, and it's all fall into the same pretty much consistent range. So if we have 8 test pit, only 1 called loamy sand, the rest of it sandy loam, but there's one sandy loam. That's what I think is. I mean, it is a little. I think it could be skewed, but that's all. I mean, all my reasons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Oram, you're next, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Novak. As it relates to the, and I'll be quick because I know time is limited, as it relates to the soil form 11, which is posted on the documents for farm road homes, it shows that what was provided by Deschang on form 11 matches my field notes. So there's no discrepancy there. The discrepancy came when the plan was designed. That data changed. And just a second note, and we'll put most of this in writing. A second note is that a septic system is not designed based on the top soils. So your top soil that was tested back in January, beginning of January of this year, is not the entire soil base that you need to test. And that's why we have soil tests that show both loamy sand and sandy loam. As you go deeper into the soils do become a little more siltier and do become more as a sandy loam in this type of situation, this actual setting, as we both agreed to in the field, and then was indicated in Form 11 provided by the engineer. But again, I know time is limited. There's some other things that just got brought up by Deschang. I will definitely work with the board to make sure we respond to the notes in question. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And just Mark, my one tiny ask is, you said I'll put most of it in writing. Please put all of it in writing, because
Yes.
that way
all of it will be put in writing. I'll respond to the questions that were just asked as well. Thank you, Rick.
very much. Sean Wang, your hand came back up. I bet it's
Yeah,
because you had
just a
something
quick.
to say.
So yeah, as I said, when we took the soil sample, we are not taking from the top. I emphasized not only I even take a picture. So at the Board of Health meeting, we showed that test pit. Mark has that was 6 feet. It's not top of the soils. So it's a 6 feet. And according to Title V, which is governing the septic system design, is for the top. You can have 12 feet of soils, but we only need the 4-foot permeable soils that you design for. So if you can have multiple different layer of soils, you can choose to use it the most restrictive. But if I have 4 feet permeable loamy sand, I can use it. there's no restriction. I have to use the bottom. Like say, if anything, you go to the bottom, it will hit the bedrock. Nobody's going to use a bedrock percolate for their septic system design. That's it's understandable. The DEP specifically call out just for 4 feet permeable soils, which is what we use, and the 6 feet, minus the top A and B soils, which is the permeable soils, very representative.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So what I'm writing down in my notes as a poor dumb lawyer and a non-engineer is the engineers are going to write down their positions. They're going to give it to Peter Dillon, and he's going to tell us what he thinks of it, and then it'll be up to the board to decide.
Good.
Mr. Moore.
Hi, Brian Moore, 49 Farm Road. I'm just hoping to call Steve and Peter's attention to page 20 of DeShang's letter where, he just stated that no one would use the bedrock perk rate for designing these systems, yet it seems as though Paul took some liberties with the saturated thickness by extrapolating more saturated thickness in the overburden from 1,500 feet of bedrock, which is the strangest thing I've ever seen. I want to make sure they look at that on page 20. And the other thing is that, we keep talking about how permeable the soil is, yet for 4 months, that pond up there has been absolutely filled to the brim. I know we've had rain, but it's not going anywhere. And one reason it might not be going anywhere is because the saturated overburden that exists along the water course on the north side of Farm Road there is all now been compacted by the addition of a new house. So you now have basically a dammed up pond across this, a good chunk of this parcel. It's changing the hydrogeology of that lot. And I would encourage Steve and Peter to look at the water course presentation I did before, and maybe look at the drone footage for the extent of the flooding. And the storativity of that pond goes all the way back beyond the Circuit Rider Trail, right to the top of the watershed there. So those are a couple points I wanted to make sure Steve and Peter took a look at. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Steve and Peter, you were paying attention and making notes of that? I hope, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Deshaun.
Quick, so for clarification, so when I was talking about the bedrock have some kind of aquifer function for dissipating water, I didn't use that number, but it's just a fact to point it out because we did all the well research as recommended by Tetra Tech around it. So we coming up, I see wells were drilled, some of them more than 1,000 feet. Of course, I don't mean to use that data, but I want to have an illustration to know that everybody will not say bedrock is totally solid. Otherwise, it will be oxymoron to drill bedrock wells for water supply. So it means there's some kind of permeability in the bedrock due to the flexures and all that. And so when you consider thousands of feet of bedrock at the top with the tectonic and the changes have flexures in it, and you say there's no function of that. That's just not a fact. So I just want to point out that fact. That's why we saw some test pit. We dig into the bedrock, but we don't see water because if there's not in the groundwater get to there, it's all observed or transported through the bedrock. Is not coming up to the bedrock. That's the way it just as a scientific and a factual pointed out, and I want to emphasize that I never use that for my analysis. So that's just to entertaining thought for science. So because it's all technical people, I'm not, because during the analysis I made it. Thank you.
Right, and I'm sure what you meant to say, and I think I heard you correctly, is not that the water seeps through the bedrock; it seeps through cracks in the bedrock.
Right, correct. Yes,
the rock itself has the usual level of absorption.
You're right. Yeah,
zero.
I meant the cracks in the bedrock, and there's no. If you're driving around the roadside, you see bedrock exposure. You see a lot of cracks in it. It's not just one piece of solid.
Totally. Okay. All right. Do we have other people here tonight who wish to speak or present on any or all of these issues? That we've sort of completed my catch up. And board members, I've been trying to steer things a little bit here, but if I miss something or you think you want to go in a different direction, here's your chance to tell me I'm crazy and then we should have done it differently. And Rebecca and Doug and Deshaun, I'll let my board members beat me up first, and then you can have it. And Arthur, then you can all have turns. Jonathan?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Zach?
Nothing, thanks.
Okay. Todd?
No questions for me at this time.
Okay, great. All right, let's see. I think Doug was first in line to beat me up. Go ahead, sir. Doug
Yeah,
Kingsley?
can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so I haven't been following this project until recently, but I spent several hours on the town website reading much of the material, so I think I'm pretty up to speed, and I think I've been following the whole conversation tonight. I guess my questions are more sort of process-based of how approvals work for this. Specifically, my understanding is this is like something like a 32 house project on a 14-acre lot that's going to require zoning waivers for lot area, minimum street frontage, lot width, setbacks, on all the sides, et cetera. And we're proposing to build a septic system for 32 houses on 14 acres. So I guess isn't the whole point of having 1 acre zoning to avoid all the problems of overburdening the groundwater and nearby wells and things like that? I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, no,
yeah, go ahead.
You're paying attention. It's a smart question. And I was actually trying to explain Sherborn zoning and how it interacts with 40B today. And I'll try that explanation out on you, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. Sherborn's 1, 2, and 3 acre zoning is not an accident. It didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't whim. And despite what may be politically popular, it wasn't motivated by trying to keep the wrong people out of town. It's because we've got terrible soil and very high groundwater and rock everywhere. And the town was sued in 1975 to overturn the 1, 2, 3 acre zoning. But the Supreme Judicial Court upheld our 1, 2, 3 acre zoning based on our unusual soils and water and ledge components, and the fact that we don't have public water and sewer. On the other hand, 40B goes the other way, Doug, and says, unless there's a sort of a compelling local interest isn't the right term, but it's an important safety interest, the local interests have to give way to the regional need for affordable housing. And so what 40B says is, Zoning Board of Appeals, you are tasked with the semi-judicial role of deciding which pieces of your zoning bylaw to set aside to accommodate the regional need for affordable housing. And one of those might be, okay, letting the 1 acre minimum per house go if there are good science-based ways to get around it. And that's what we spend an awful lot of our time doing.
Can I follow up?
Sorry?
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's super helpful. Thank you for explaining that. I've had some experience with the 96 Wetlands Protection Act. I mean, my non-scientific reading of these design plans have buildings and roads well within the 100-foot buffer zone. And again, it's the same question for conservation. Is 40B,
okay.
Let me finish the question. Does 40B somehow trump the Conservation Commission's ability to implement the 96 Wetland Protection Act? Because, just speaking personally, like, I've had the Conservation Commission all over me the day I moved in here because I live on Farm Pond. I mean, my impression is that you can't build any structures in the buffer zone. And this looks like we're talking about a road and a bunch of houses. So how's that work?
Yeah. So you're right. 40B not only says zoning board, you sit in the shoes of the planning board and you sit in the shoes of the zoning enforcement officer, and you essentially replace them in administering the zoning bylaw with fairly broad powers to give waivers where they make sense. Same thing with the CONSCOM. Same thing with the Board of Health. I mean, you'll hear in these hearings, if you go to a lot of them, I'll ask Michael Lesser for the CONSCOM and Daryl Beersley for the Board of Health what their positions are, because they are sort of our subject matter expert boards. They have no authority here, none whatsoever. It all sits with the ZBA. All of their jurisdiction has been hijacked to us by the statute. And by the way, I don't think it's a good statute and I don't like it, but it's my job to administer it.
All right. So you're saying the Zoning Board of Appeals basically now has a say over what the Conservation Commission would normally decide?
Yes, absolutely.
And does that go for the Board of Health?
Yes.
Really? Wow.
Sorry.
So just one last question.
Ask me if I enjoy it. No.
No. Hey, Rick, Paul, I think Paul's trying to raise his
Mr.
hand.
Haverty, go ahead. You're trying.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to.
Your human hand.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to clarify. Chapter 40B allows an applicant to request waivers of local rules and requirements, and the Board of Appeals steps into the shoes of the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health as it applies to local rules and requirements, but it does not override the Commission's jurisdiction under the Wetlands Protection Act or the Board of Health's jurisdiction under Title V.
That's a better way of putting it. I adopt Mr. Haverty's answer.
Thank you.
Did that still make sense, Doug?
Well, that now confused me. Does that mean the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission could, for example, I'm not saying they would, but for example, say no to all this? I mean, I don't like.
Well, the difference is that if the Conservation Commission said no under the Wetlands Protection Act, the applicant could take that up to the state, and the DEP would be essentially the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, here's an appeal. Got it.
And same with some things for Board of Health. So what 40B says, as Paul articulated better than I do, is any extra local requirements like local CONSCOM regs, local additional CONSCOM offsets, anything that's not in the State Wetlands Protection Act, that's what we get suddenly put in charge of instead of the CONSCOM. Same with the Board of Health. Anything that's not absolutely directly right out of Title V, but exists in our local Board of Health regulations, those things get moved to us. How is that, Paul?
Very good.
Okay.
That's super helpful. So just the last point of clarification. So, it sounds like the ZBA has kind of final approval of, or dial, whatever you want to call it, over all of this. Is that sort of the simple shorthand?
Well, yes, although, our decisions too get appealed, and they get appealed to the Housing Appeals Committee.
I see. So,
and the track record of approval of turndowns by the Housing Appeals Committee is very poor. You better have good reasons, and you better have articulated them well. If you just say, if we were to say to Paul, sorry, we're not feeling the love for your project, no, he'd flip us right away.
No, I got it. But what I'm getting at is when I think of the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals generally, somebody comes to you and says, oh, I want to build a shed on a property line. Typically, you're going to say, well, no, because that sets a precedent for the next guy who wants to build something on the property line. I'm assuming if this were to pass as proposed, I'm not saying it would, that would set a whole series of precedents. I mean, I have more than 14 acres on Farm Pond. I'm assuming if this was all, passed, that I could sort of come up with a similar 32 house project on Farm Pond and say, look, you came up with a precedent here a mile down the road. I'm gonna use the same precedent.
Yeah, the precedential value is there, but it tends to be limited, Doug, because each site has to be approved on its own merit. And frankly, you don't need precedential value. if you decide with to take your 14 acres on Farm Pond and turn it into a 40B 32 unit thing. By the way, I love your house. Please don't do that, but I don't get a vote. The fact that we'd done it before wouldn't be the issue. The fact that whether or not you were entitled to it under the statute would be the issue. You might not need precedent. Is that a fair answer?
I think
so we don't worry terribly much about establishing a bad precedent because we always have Paul Haverty or somebody just like him hanging over our head saying, you know, if you go outside the handcuffs of the statute, I'll be all over you. And that's just Paul doing his job.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Fenno, I think you were next up with the bat. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sorry, turn my camera on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Arthur Fenno, 58 Farm Road. I actually don't need to. I think my camera's on. I don't need to ask a question if the comment period or the hearings are going to be extended for some period of time, which I get the sense they are, or is that not the case?
Not yet determined. It sounds like, and Bob, I'm looking at you as I'm saying this, we need to do at least a short extension to let you react to things that came in just before the hearing, and also to let Tetra Tech react to some things that we discussed tonight. So I'm thinking we're probably looking at a short extension, but if you say there isn't going to be an extension, then there won't be one.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, we will agree to a short extension. I do think that the peer review comment letters need to be closed out. It would be helpful for us to have the opportunity not only to see the comments from the Board of Health, but also to respond to them. So we're going to agree to a short extension by the end of the night, yes.
So 3 years. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. Everyone who's been in this
but you're only half kidding.
How it works. It isn't how it works. That was a joke. Okay.
And actually, can I ask you one more question? You said there was an
Please, go ahead.
SJC opinion that affirmed Sherborn's right of 1 acre zoning. Do you have that off the top of your head?
I know it was from 1975, and it's the SJC. And it's, I think it might be Attorney General versus Town of Sherborn.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Wilson is the Wilson.
Wilson, thank you. It's Wilson versus Sherborn. Thank you, Meredith. Law school was a long time ago for me. I'm sorry. I'm losing my touch.
Me as well.
Okay, Sarah Raggy, you're next.
Thank you. I am just reiterating some communications I've had with the Zoning Board of Appeals to say that I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an investor in this project. I'm simply a past resident of Abbey Road, and I would like to reiterate that a private water delivery system is inequitable to residents that are part of that community, and it also does not ensure for routine testing to make sure that the water quality is of a standard of drinking quality for the state. Thank you.
But this board could certainly condition that, Rick. We all know that.
And I would say that conditions are nearly impossible to reinforce. I think that the board should closely look at how the town's resources, how available they are to enforcing conditions.
Okay, got it. You said that before, and it's a good reminder of that position. Thank you. Deshaun Wang. You're muted, sir.
Sorry, I forgot to comment on Ms. Morse about the isolated land subject to flooding here. This year is just extremely wet, and we have surveyed and staked it out, and we also analyzed their drawn photos. The water and not the impact of what any soil testing. We haven't really done much on the site except 53 Farm Road construction is way downgraded, and so we reviewed the aerial photos dating back 20-30 years ago, which is pretty much yield really consistent and limit of the flooding as we seen this year, and that's just want to get that on record. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rebecca, you were next, and then Meredith Kozlowski.
Yes, hi, thanks. Rebecca Honeywell. So the Department of Housing and Community Development, together with the Board of Health in Sherborn, thinks that protecting drinking water is a safety issue. And in response to Deshang's comment right now, whether we have, no matter what the weather is, we need the residents of a future residential development to have safe drinking water. So we have to think about this. And if a public water supply is not economic, I would argue that it's not economic for the town to build any housing, private, public, affordable, market value that doesn't have safe drinking water in a town that doesn't have public sewer infrastructure. But that's not affordable for anyone. And I just wanted to reinforce that point.
An excellent point. And Rebecca, you reminded me of something I wanted to mention to Doug. If you're sort of reading up on all of this, take a look on the website at some of the postings by Attorney Murphy from Hill Law. Not that his lawyerly wisdom is any better than any of the rest of us, but he plays for the anti-development side, and you'll see him citing the Stowe case in which he was involved, where a 40B was defeated because there were threats to water supply from the septic system. That's grotesque, grossly oversimplifying, but that's something you'd want to read up on.
And it's even more horrific if existing homes where people have lived forever suddenly have contaminated drinking water, and how does that protect the town? And it has a great impact. So I think we need to consider these things.
Right. Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meredith.
I just wanted to provide an anecdotal, I guess, story. House, different state, different soil, different configuration. A garage went up across the street, and the water table did clearly get changed to where our basement started flooding. So it's not unheard of that this happened. Yeah. I haven't gotten to that stage on Washington yet, learning that, but I can't imagine that these structures won't impact the table.
Right. Okay. All right. Other generalized comments from anybody, board members, applicant or otherwise? Otherwise, I might move to discussion, Bob, of timing, if that's agreeable to you.
Sure.
Peter Dillon, Steve Booley, can you give us a timeline for your expected response to the Creative Land and Water Engineering item dated the 17th, filed the 19th? And hopefully that will include your reactions to the follow-up on Peter's meeting with Deshawn on how to cut the groundwater mounding knot. I've probably mixed 12 metaphors there, but issue. What do you think is a likely time frame for that?
Yeah, we should be able to do the meeting and have a response in within 2 weeks. But I don't see an issue with that.
All right. So if you got that before the 8th, Bob and team, how long do you need after that to review it?
Sorry, Rick, the 8th? I thought we were talking about next week.
I thought he'd said 2 weeks.
Oh. Steve, you're thinking 2 weeks?
Well, we need to meet, and then we'll have to finalize all our comments. So to be safe, yeah, I'd like to have 2 weeks with current workload as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll respond as quickly as we can, Rick. Maybe give us a week. Deshang, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think so. At this point, I think it's a week. So when after we receive the comments back from Tetra Tech,
sure,
maybe 10 days, depending on when. So if we get it from Friday, or Monday, so it will be a little bit different because it's going to be have some kind of other projects also competing time. That's right now I'm top of it's working over hours is too much. So
Right.
but I definitely, yeah, it sounds like it's doable because I think the majority of the issues I believe we addressed in the province's code.
So Steve, we Deshang and you and Peter are going to meet next week, though. Is that what we understood?
Yeah, that's the idea. My guess is we can get most of those outstanding items resolved, and it could be sooner than the 8th. I just want to have some time there based on current workload.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you still intended for the three of you to meet early next week. That's all.
Correct.
That'll obviously move things forward.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So Bob, if I'm counting correctly, that's the a week after the 8th is the 15th, a Wednesday.
Yes. I'm thinking, how about the 21st, Rick? Would that work for you all?
Okay.
I'm away the week of the 13th.
Got it. And the 20th, let's see, Memorial Day is the 27th. So this is the week before Memorial Day, Tuesday the 24th. First, board members.
21st.
Tuesday the 21st. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Board members, how does Tuesday the 21st work for you?
That's fine.
And then we're off Wednesday, which gets us out of your way, Board of Health. I know you hate it when we meet on Wednesdays, because we're getting in your way then. All right. So I'd like to make a motion that we leave the hearing open. We continue. Oops, hold on. Let me make the motion, then we'll get over to you, Daryl. That we continue this, leave the public hearing open, and continue it till Tuesday night, May 21st, 2024, 7 p.m. By Zoom. That's my motion, and if I can get a second, then we'll take Daryl and we'll have debate on it.
I second.
Okay. All right. Moved and seconded. All right. We'll put the motion aside for a moment. Daryl.
Just want to ask if it's possible to maybe streamline communications, and would it be possible to have Mark participate in the meeting with Steve and Peter and Deshang? Don't have to answer that now, but might just make things easier.
All right. From the board standpoint, I don't think the board has any opposition to it, and anything that leads to more consensus is good in my view. So, Bob, I will leave that to you and Deshaun and Peter to decide whether you want Mark to join you or whether that's additive.
Okay. Well, why don't we take that offline, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. Thank you. Smart ad, Daryl. Thank you. Okay. Moved and seconded to continue to Tuesday, 5/21/24, 7 p.m. Any further discussion? Don't see any. All right. Do it by roll call. All in favor of extending, say aye. Novak votes aye.
Fitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
All right. We're extended. Thank you, everyone, for your cooperation. It's a difficult and complicated process, and I appreciate the help in pulling the threads together, because every meeting I miss one or two of them.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Everybody have a great evening, and go back to the Celtics and the Bruins.
Mr. Chair, I think the Board of Health needs to close their meeting.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's.
I know it's always one of those things.
But but thank you. It's why we have other lawyers on the call. Thank you, Arthur. Okay. Are there any other boards?
Thank you, Arthur. Like to adjourn? So excited about the meeting being over. Okay. So, do I have a motion from the board to close the meeting?
So moved. Seconded.
Hey, any other discussion? Hearing none. Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Diana Hook, aye.
Rebecca Honeywell, aye.
Julie Dreyfus, aye.
All right. Moved to adjourn the meeting by Novak. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Novak vote, do it by roll call. Novak votes aye.
Pitch, aye.
Labby, aye.
McBride, aye.
All right, we're out. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Night.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.